The moment Ethan Walker saw her sitting at that table, his heart dropped so suddenly it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. His fingers tightened around the car keys in his pocket, and for a split second, he considered turning around and walking back out into the cold night. He had spent weeks preparing himself for this evening, convincing his anxious heart that he deserved one small chance at happiness, and now it felt like fate was laughing at him. Because the woman seated by the window, nervously stirring a cup of untouched coffee, was the last person he ever expected to see on a date. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when people least expect them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. Ethan had not planned for life to turn out the way it did. At 36, he was a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily on his own after losing his wife, Claire, to a sudden illness 3 years earlier. Grief had hollowed him out in ways he never spoke about, carving silence into his days and exhaustion into his nights. Every morning began before sunrise, packing Lily's lunch, braiding her hair the best he could, and leaving sticky notes in her bag with clumsy hearts drawn in blue ink. He worked long hours as a project coordinator at a mid-sized architecture firm, pushing through deadlines not because he loved the job, but because stability was the one promise he could still keep. At work, Ethan was known as dependable and quiet. He smiled politely, avoided office gossip, and declined invitations that involved staying out late. Most of his co-workers didn't know much about his life beyond the framed photo of Lily on his desk and the faint tiredness behind his eyes. Among them was Hannah Brooks, a colleague from the design team. She was kind in a way that never felt forced, offering help without making a show of it, remembering birthdays, and occasionally bringing extra coffee during late project nights. Ethan appreciated her warmth but kept his distance, careful not to let anyone see how fragile he still felt inside. The idea of dating again had terrified him. Friends insisted he was too young to give up on love, that Lily deserved to see her father smile again. After months of hesitation, he finally agreed to create a profile on a dating app, choosing a simple photo and writing honestly about being a single dad. When a woman named Rachel matched with him, their conversations were easy, gentle, and filled with shared stories about favorite books and childhood memories. After 2 weeks of messaging, they agreed to meet at a quiet café downtown. Ethan had spent the entire day battling nerves, rehearsing polite smiles in the mirror and reminding himself that this was just coffee, not a promise of forever. Now, standing at the entrance of the café, his mind raced. Hannah was there, seated exactly where his date was supposed to be. She wore a soft blue sweater, her hair loosely tied back, and there was a look of vulnerability on her face he had never seen at the office. Ethan's first thought was that she had taken the wrong table, maybe mistaking it for someone else's reserved spot. He glanced at his phone, double-checking the profile photo Rachel had sent. The resemblance was undeniable. The realization crept in slowly, like a tide pulling him under. Hannah Brooks was Rachel. Moments earlier, Hannah had been wrestling with her own fears. She had known Ethan as a coworker for over a year, admired his dedication to Lily, and quietly developed feelings she never believed she could act on. When she joined the dating app at the encouragement of her sister, she never imagined she would match with him. She chose to use a nickname and an older photo, unsure if she was ready to cross that invisible line between professional distance and personal truth. By the time they agreed to meet, she considered canceling, afraid that seeing disappointment in his eyes would hurt more than never knowing. Ethan approached the table slowly, his heart pounding so loudly he wondered if others could hear it. Confusion, embarrassment, and an unexpected flicker of relief tangled inside him. They exchanged awkward smiles, both realizing that there was no mistake to undo, only a truth to face. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken thoughts, but neither of them stood up or walked away. Instead, they stayed, because sometimes courage is nothing more than choosing not to. As the minutes passed, the tension softened. They talked about work at first, then about Lily, and gradually about the parts of themselves they rarely shared. Ethan spoke about the fear of failing his daughter, about the nights he stayed awake wondering if love would ever feel safe again. Hannah listened with a depth that surprised him, her eyes reflecting understanding rather than pity. She shared her own story of loss, of growing up caring for a younger brother, of feeling invisible in relationships where she gave more than she received. The cafe faded into the background as something fragile and real began to form between them. The challenges did not disappear with one honest conversation. Ethan struggled with guilt, questioning whether opening his heart meant betraying the memory of his late wife. Hannah worried about workplace boundaries and the risk of becoming entangled in something complicated. There were moments in the weeks that followed when they pulled back, unsure of their footing. But each time, they found their way forward through patience and small acts of trust. Hannah learned how to braid Lily's hair properly, laughing with her over tangled strands. Ethan learned that joy could coexist with grief, that loving again did not erase the past but honored it by continuing to live fully. Life tested them in quiet ways. Lily fell ill one night, and Hannah showed up with soup and calm reassurance, staying until morning. A big project at work failed, and Ethan felt the familiar weight of inadequacy, but Hannah reminded him of his resilience. Slowly, the walls Ethan had built brick by brick began to crumble. He found himself smiling more, laughing without guilt, and feeling present in moments that once slipped by unnoticed. Months later, on an ordinary evening much like the one they first met, Ethan realized how much had changed. He watched Hannah reading a bedtime story to Lily, her voice gentle, Lily's head resting against her shoulder. The sight filled him with a warmth he thought he had lost forever. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was real, and it felt like home. Just before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask you something. Please comment below with one word that describes how this story is making you feel right now. Your words mean more than you know, and they help keep stories like this alive. Ethan learned that night at the cafe that life has a strange way of rearranging plans. What he thought was a mistake became a turning point, a reminder that healing often arrives disguised as discomfort. Hannah learned that taking a risk, even one that feels terrifying, can lead to a love built on honesty and patience. Together, they didn't create a perfect life, but they built a meaningful one, shaped by understanding, kindness, and the courage to begin again. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel less alone or reminded you that hope can appear when you least expect it, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who are still waiting for their own unexpected miracle.